On the second day of Tantrosav 2021, we have Manoj Pavitran with us. He is going to talk about Neelakantha, which is our theme this year. Manoj Pavitran is a practitioner of Sri Aurobindo's Integral Yoga and lives in Auroville since 1995. He is an educator, filmmaker, and software developer at the same time and enjoys making all activities of his daily living into transformational practices. His films on integral yoga can be found at www.sopanam.org. His educational work can be found at aci.auroville.org. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat box, and if we have time, we will take them. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining for this festival of Tantra, for this offering. I would like to start with the stotra for Shiva. Omkaram Bindu Samyuktam Nityam Dhyayanti Yoginah Omkaraya Namo Namah Namam Dirishayo Deva Namam Sangana Naranamanti Devesham Nakaraya Namo Namah Mahadevam Mahatmanam Mahadhyanam Parayanam Mahapapa Haram Devam Makaraya Namo Namah Shivam Shantam Jagannatham Lokanugraha Karakam Shivameka Padam Nityam Shikaraya Namo Namah Vahanam Rishabho Yasya Vasuki Kanthabhushanam Vame Shakti Dharam Devam Vakaraya Namo Namah Yatra Yatra Stito Deva Sarvavyapi Maheshwara Yo Guru Sarvadevana Yakaraya Namo Namah Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva is one of the most enigmatic beings encountered, worshipped, adored, merged with by the ancient rishis, sages, yogins of this country. Who is this? And how relevant is he today for our future? The one who is known as Neelakantha, the blue-throated god. Why Neelakantha? Who is he? Kantha, the throat, the seat of our Vishuddhi chakra, the divine purity. The God who could drink the poison of the world to save the world. Who is he? The being who is the master of all our animal instincts, impulses, drives, impulsions. The being for whom the bull is the vehicle. The male strength, potency, and force of nature. He has mastered these forces. He's an ascetic who has mastered these forces. And he wears the tiger skin, another aspect of the animal nature within us. That is his clothing. And Vasuki, the Kantabhushanam, his garland, his ornament, the serpent, the dangerous serpent, Vasuki, the serpent of desire, is an ornament to this great God. It is in him, in such a being, all these powers of nature are servants, are ornaments, are vehicles. And on his matted hair is a crescent moon. The mind getting illumined by the light of the Spirit. If sun is the full glory of our true self, the eternal self, its light reflects in the mind, and mind grows spiritually. That crescent moon is another adornment on his hair. Then on his matted hair from above descends Ganga. It is he who can hold that descent. The descending higher consciousness from above. It's a yogic experience. The force, the consciousness, the light, all that pours down from above. To receive it, you must have that poise of Shiva. You must have mastered all the animal impulses and drives and impulses. And in that stillness, in that vastness of his being, is the descent that can transform our nature. Such is this being. But he was dreaded by the rishis, by very presence of his dreadful energy, Rudra. They prayed to him, "O Rudra, spare us from your wrath." For his utterance can be devastating. His force can be devastating because he destroys the falsehood. And that can be extremely shaking to all. And as it flows out from you as an utterance through speech, as he enters and speaks through you. When your word distilled in the potency of your tapasya, when the might enters, and if the lower nature mixes with it, if your animal impulses and instincts are mixed with that force, it's not the falsehood that gets destroyed, but everything around. And the rishis, or some of the rishis, their temperamental anger could have been devastating in many contexts. So they were praying, "O Shiva, or Rudra, spare me." Yet it is that power, when we are purified, it can destroy the falsehood, bring the truth, transform our nature. And in integral yoga, Sri Aurobindo refers to this churning of the ocean. In the chapter, the ascent of the sacrifice. Here, one fundamental difference is in traditional Tantra, the work ascends from bottom up, the Kundalini force ascending from below, going upward. Whereas in integral yoga, the Shakti is the descending Shakti from above. And it is that which transforms our lower nature. And in that process is the churning of life, churning of the ocean of life. That's where this incredible story from our mythology come into play. Our ancient seers were incredible storytellers. They encrypted profound psychological processes and knowledge in symbolic language. The turning of the ocean is one such amazing stories. And it takes place at a time when the Devas were defeated or conquered or invaded by the Asuras. So put it into psychological terms. Within us, there are forces of integration and harmony and forces of division and disintegration. Or to get closer to experience. The highest faculty of our consciousness is currently the rational intelligence, the mind, where the light is beginning to express itself. But this gets invaded by our desires, our impulses, our ambitions, drives. And that invasion dims the light, damages it, depossesses its potency, its capacity. And there is a purification that is required. But we are caught in the duality of right and wrong, good and bad, attractive and repulsive, pleasant and unpleasant. And how do we hold these two things together and find that which unifies all things? That's where the two sides are churning us. Now, this churning in ancient story is done by using Mount Manthara as the churning pole. Usually, a mountain is a symbol of, first of all, the physical consciousness in matter and its ascending aspiration. In the very material substance itself, there is an upward movement. And it is held firm by the tortoise below. Tortoise is again a symbol representing the physical consciousness, immortality in the physical. And in the temples, at least in Kerala, we can see that the pole on which the flag of a temple is tied rests on a tortoise. Coming to our human bodily reference, we can say in our Muladhara below is the tortoise, the physical consciousness. And there is the Merudanda, the axis, upon which the churning takes place. Attractions, repulsions, right, wrong, good, bad. And the churning is to bring forth the nectar of immortality. And our ancient seers had this audacity to claim or to seek after immortality. Even though all the people who were born have died, they sought immortality. The daring attempt of the Vedic rishis, the search for immortality. Of immortality, there is this churning. So our psychological nature, if we look around, is getting churned. Vasuki, the serpent of desire, is the rope with which the churning is done. The very material world, its consciousness, and the life energy, the ocean of milk, in which, if we look at our present civilization, what is it doing? It is journeying with this rope of desire, the entire material existence, our material life, our material nature, producing goods of desire. And naturally, there is the poison being spit by Vasuki. The sky is polluted, our air is polluted, even our psychology is getting polluted. As in the old story, in the churning, many things emerged. Apsaras, for example. Those who fulfill the sensual pleasures. Our hedonistic impulses and its fulfillment. Our sensory indulgence, temptations. And we have the model girls and models, beautiful models across the world, from billboards tempting to buy the objects of desire. Today, when we look at the world, even the media is so polluted, the hate speech, such reactions arise, the impulses. We are creatures of impulses. So in our psychological transformation process, individually and collectively, there is this aspect of the shadow. It's part of that transformational journey, where there is something dark in the human nature that shows up. In the Western psychology, we have Carl Jung, who done quite some work in that aspect of the shadow, dealing with the shadow that shows up in the transformational journey that we undertake when we seek a higher consciousness. And in India, we have Tantra that has dealt with it extensively, the notion of the Papa Purusha and the transformation of the Papa Purusha. And in integral yoga, the approach is different. It is the descending higher consciousness that transforms. So the beginning of that emergence of the shadow, especially when you gather within you through your tapasya, your energies, as your potency increases, and as the light increases, as the light enters you, so does the unconscious throw up its hidden stuff, starting with our personal internal sorrows and pains and struggles and hatred and anger and fear and jealousy. The very forces that disintegrates our inner nature. In the yoga of liberation, this is not addressed. You can exit. You need to only quieten this, exit from the body, detach from the body. You don't transform this lower nature. But in the yoga of transformation, as we open upward into higher consciousness, as the peace and stillness descends from above, as it settles into the human nature. The hidden layers show up, and it shows up as our triggers, external triggers, where the raging anger shows up, or the fears come and grip, or the invasion of jealousy or hatred. Now, the hatred simply expresses through you when you do not really have mastery over yourself. And it is the poison that breeds more hatred, and it spreads across. And this cannot be controlled, or it cannot be transformed by our mind and its right of reason. It needs a higher consciousness. That's where the descending Shakti is essential for transformation. It is in Shiva aspect. When the animal instincts are mastered and held, then when the Sahasrara opens to higher consciousness, and from there the descending force enters, first as peace, as silence, and establishes the stillness. In that, these fumes and fires undergo transformation. And for that to happen, the flame of aspiration within, the psychic being within as its emergence, holds the base here. And interestingly, in the story of the churning, one of the flower that emerges is Parijata, a flower to which the mother gave the name aspiration. Now, aspiration is something very different from desire, from ambition, from mental will, arise from the soul. It knows the truth. It goes towards the truth above. And it calls that to come down. And it brings the purity. And it is this ascending movement from below and the descending movement from above that transforms, that clears the mind, clears our lower nature, clears eventually our speech. The throat is the seat of purity. The Vishuddhi chakra, the invasion of anger. It's a live demonstration. So these forces come in, and it can enter speech. It can grip us from within. Purified speech. Tapasya of speech. So that our utterance arises from a consciousness that is prepared, made calm, made wide, made still. All the animal instincts are mastered. They are only ornaments, vehicles. When the Shivatvam is established, you can drink the poison of the world that comes to you. Then alone, it gets purified, transformed. You don't spit it out. You become a space where transformation is happening. the anger, the pain, the sorrow, the suffering, the poisons of the world pours into you. The very fact that we are protected in a tiny little cocoon of our little ego and its consciousness, we are more or less protected by the larger dark side in nature. But in the sadhana, as the consciousness opens and widens, the invasion is inevitable. And to handle it, we need that stillness of Shiva, the perfect verticality, the perfect stillness of the horizontality, upon which the descending Shakti can enter and purify the instrumental nature. And the triggers that arise from within, that speaks out through our speech and cause devastation outside, are transformed by the descending light. That's why Neelakantha, the one who took the poison, without getting destroyed in the process, become a necessary condition of the being. A being that is free, untouched by desires, untouched by violent animal nature, who has mastered all this. It is in him the word of truth can enter and find expression. There is a beautiful moment Sri Aurobindo describing in Savitri, where Savitri, the divine word born to save the world, is searching for her right partner in life. And there is a destined meeting place where she meets Satyavan. As she enters that space, in the deep forest, in the blue mountain ranges, that's where Sri Aurobindo describes this matted-haired ascetic gazing from the mountain stillness, the blue-throated god. In that space, she meets Satyavan, the soul of humanity. Today, the soul of humanity, our global civilization is being churned, and the poison is spreading all over the place. The hate speech is all over the place. The very throat is choked in anger, in hatred, in sorrow, in suffering. And all that was held below the lid, the subconscious, is opening up. All the atrocities of the past is coming back with vengeance. As our nature is getting polluted, the poison is spreading far and wide. It is of utmost importance that we know Shiva, Neelakantha, the being who commands all that animal instincts. In his very gaze, Kamadeva was burnt. Don't approach him with desire. Pure aspiration, purified of all the lower instincts. That alone is the protection, is the safety in approaching him. Because his very utterance can destroy the falsehood we hold on to. He's a mighty power. And it is when that being settles, the universal compassion arises. And it is this God who doesn't distinguish between the thief and the sage. Taskaranam pataye namo namah. The one who is compassionate towards all beings, whether you are a thief or a sage. His compassion is the same. It is only with that state of being settled within, we go beyond the duality to have the compassion and love towards all beings, whether he's a thief or a sinner or a devil or an evil. It is in his wideness there is possibility of transformation. It is in his foundation of oneness the descending Shakti enters, and it is in her dance the world transformation happens. And it is their play. The Shiva and Shakti united transform the world. With that, I would like to invite your sharing, your insights, questions if there are. I'd be happy to take them up.
If there are any questions, please you can put in a message in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask the question. Manojji, there is one question that we have got. The
Yeah.
question is, how do you retain your equanimity in such situations?
Yes, the equanimity is a fundamental quality to develop if we are aspiring yogic consciousness, yogic transformation. Here again, there is a phase of our individual effort to control the impulses that are there in us, the movements of our lower nature, of desires, cravings, drives. All these are, to great extent, can be controlled by mental will and discipline, but that cannot transform them. True equanimity can come only when the consciousness widens. And the force descending from above, the Shakti descending from above, settles, clears this nature, widens. In that point, equanimity naturally arises. Because the inmost part of your being is increasingly establishing in stillness and silence and widening from there. And it is your outer being that is engaging in action. So you are at once stillness and movement. If we have not established that inner poise, equanimity is a precarious, momentary status that can get easily swept off by the subconscious bursting forth with its dark forces. So, key to equanimity, the deeper key to equanimity, going beyond our individual will, is to open to the divine will and force that descends from above, divine consciousness that descends from above. And that widens the instrumental nature. In that wideness alone is true equanimity that arises.
Manoj ji, we have two more questions. I'll read the first one out and then we'll go to the next. The first one is, how do we practice detachment and balance in our day-to-day life?
Yes, day-to-day life is the perfect place to practice. Now, detachment, it's a highly glorified term. And often we find that people who pursue detachment end up being so passive, so dull and boring, losing their juice, the rasa of life. Here again, a freedom in detachment, freedom to thoroughly enjoy the moment, to become one with the moment, when your whole being is one with the dynamic flowering of action. When your fragmentation is gathered, when your concentration is focused, when we observe everyday little activities, we can see that we are either moved by inertia or an impulse or a desire or some mental constructs. So there's a witnessing consciousness that can observe all this, and that is the beginning of detachment. Ability to see our thought, our speech, our action, and the source of their movements. What is animating my thought, my speech, my action? From where does they arise? That gaze, pure witness gaze, can go deep and from there to widen As we widen and deepen, we can begin to see the deeper roots of our thoughts, our impulses, our attachments. In that seeing, naturally, the detachment grows. But that is only the beginning. Eventually, you have the ability to choose which wave to ride and which wave to become one with and allow its manifestation. There, the freedom. To ride on a wave of becoming in action and totally absorbed in it and enjoying the delight of its wave, its ananda. So, the first voice, the Sakshi power, the detachment of the witnessing part. But if you settle only in that, you lose the juice of life. Next stage of its evolution, it's its widening, deepening in that stillness, and from there, this is the movement of truth. As you recognize the source as an inspiring presence of truth moving through you, you go with the wave with the whole heart. Surrender to it. And then that is where the Shakti reveals, takes you holding hands into new shores of adventure, where you are not the doer, she is the doer. You become increasingly an enjoyer. And your seeking is to see her glory, her ananda, her beauty. That's when you get intoxicated by that Shivananda Lahari, the dance of Shakti, the Saundari Lahari. It is she who does all things. To know her as the one who does everything, creates everything. And in that adoration is the transformation. Every little activity of the day, when you see that glory, naturally undergoes transformation. You undergo transformation. You see things differently. You experience things differently. So witness and trace the source of movement. And when you are centered deep in your heart, and as the movement radiates from there, naturally, with detachment and freedom comes that embracing ananda of creation. There is a question in the chat room about Shakti, the feminine element in the churning. What role does she play? Yes, Pushkar?
I was just going to read that question out, Manojji.
Yeah.
Can you shed some light on the Shakti, the feminine element in the churning? What role does she play?
So in this churning, it is Shakti alone who can actually transform our lower nature. It is Shakti who makes Shiva who he is. Like in Shankaracharya's very first line of Saundari Lahari. Without her, this God cannot even pulsate. He cannot even move. So the force that descends from above, that is what we are referring to as Shakti. There is Prakriti, there is a lower nature with its habitual drives impulses, fragmentations, whereas the higher nature operates through oneness. So in this journey, as the stuff rises up, it is only this descending force that can hold your poise. In fact, if we do not really have that force entering and possessing the instrument, we lose our balance. Without her, transformation is impossible. That consciousness coming from the higher nature is a natural harmonizer, transformer, purifier. And that makes the journey and transformation painless. That's why integral yoga is a sunlit path. There is no drama required, no pain required. But first is to recognize her presence and movement and surrender to her. She alone can transform, nothing else.
Manojji, and other question that we have is, how do we know when something appearing bad or evil can be used for our transformation, and when it is necessary to remove the bad or evil source? Does evil outside have a place in our transformation?
As our boundaries begins to dissolve, as our consciousness begins to expand and become sensitive, we begin to see that the distinction between outer and inner is rather limiting. What outside is only a mirror reflecting what we are. We are the world. We are the world in transition, in transformation, in ferment. Somebody out there who appears to be evil or dark is only representing a movement in nature, which is equally present in you because you are one with the whole. And if it disturbs you, that means there is a weakness in you, there is a trace in you, there is a shadow in you of that. As long as what appears to be outside is disturbing you, as long as the blame is on that which is outside, for my sorrow, my pain, missing the point. That mirror principle, that what is out there actually is within me. If something is disturbing, that means there is a trace that I have to find within me that needs to be unpacked, that needs to be purified, that needs to be transformed. As I transform, it begins to see the hands of the God behind all that appears to be dreadful. It has a place in the scheme of things. But as we establish increasingly in that one single awareness that all this is nothing but the divine, then what appears to be the dark, the evil, you see that it is a mask. The beloved is behind the game. And you are being forged through a cunning game that our mind cannot comprehend. But our heart and whole being must focus exclusively on one divine behind all things. As long as there is division of good and bad, we are bound to be caught in the conflict, and drama. So when there is any form of outer appearances showing up that is disturbing you, there is work to do. That doesn't mean that there will not be any disturbing elements out there. But you develop mountain stillness. People can throw stone at you. So what? Your being is free. In that freedom, the true action, true speech can arise. And we must see the one everywhere. One and the only being. That's a challenge. And that's the game. That's what Shiva offers. Then he can dance in ecstasy.
Thank you very much for agreeing to spend this evening and sharing your knowledge with us. Dr. Mala Kapadia will join us tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Her talk is about Ardhanarishwara. I request the participants to come back tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Namaste.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you.